We have a special guest speaker here for our Kentucky Farm to School Network bi-monthly meeting. Her name is Melanie Wong, and Melanie is the Farm to Early Care and Education Specialist at the Groundwork Center for Resilient Communities out of Traverse City, Michigan, which you can see there on the map where that is. She has a Master's of Arts in Family and Consumer Sciences with a concentration in dietetics, and she's a registered dietitian. She promotes the benefits of serving locally grown food and farm to school / ECE programming and manages the social media and communications for 10 cents a meal, which we've talked about a couple different times during our meetings. The 10 cents a meal program provides extra reimbursement for meals that serve locally grown food in Michigan. Melanie also assists ECE and school communities with building capacity for farm to school / ECE work and participating in 10 cents a meal by connecting with a broad spectrum of partners and the public to help them understand the mission and importance of the program. And we asked Melanie to come here today because I had seen her speak in some of the presentations that they did about 10 cents a meal earlier this year. And I was really inspired by their Farm to ECE efforts. And Farm to ECE is probably not as far along as our general farm to school efforts in Kentucky. And I've seen from the presentation that Melanie gave that it seems like Michigan has some really great farm to ECE efforts. And so we have lots to learn and we're excited to hear from you today, Melanie. So I will turn it over to you and stop sharing my screen so that you can go ahead and start your presentation.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Mackenzie, for the invitation and introduction. And hey, everybody. I'm really glad to be chatting with you today. Like Mackenzie said, I am looking forward to sharing some information about what is going on with farm to early care and education here in Michigan. And I also have some slides on 10 cents a meal to kind of walk you through that program as well and how that in combination with some of the other farm to EC initiatives here in Michigan are working to push farm to early care and education forward. So let me go ahead and share my screen. Okay, give me a thumbs up if you can see that PowerPoint. Awesome. Grab my notes here. Okay, so hi everybody, I'm Melanie. I am Farm to Early Care and Education Specialist at Groundwork Center for Resilient Communities. And my organization is based in Traverse City. And we also have an office in Petoskey, which is a little bit, I'm going to whip out the hand. Traverse City is around here and Petoskey is a little bit further north. It's about an hour and a half once you go through all of the inland lakes and the rural Michigan roads. But I actually am located more over here in Grand Rapids. I work remotely from my home office here in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and I'm from over here in Metro Detroit. So I love this state. I've gone across and back many times, and I've landed here in Grand Rapids where I'm doing work statewide and also locally with the Grand Rapids community. So as Mackenzie said, I work really closely with 10 cents a meal. It is our state local food incentive program. I have some slides that are going to talk about 10 cents a meal a little bit later, but I also just wanted to give a shout out to some of the other partners who are involved with 10 cents a meal. So of course, the Michigan Department of Education is our state partner who implements the grant itself. And then the Michigan Department of Agriculture and Rural Development is also involved for some of the farmer outreach and farmer producer side things. And then the Michigan State University Center for Regional Food Systems helps to manage the evaluation component for 10 cents a meal. And then us at Groundwork, we are the communications and outreach partner for 10 cents a meal. And we have a little bit of a storied history with the program, having piloted it some 10 years ago. All right, so I'm just going to start off simply with what is Farm to ECE. So Farm to ECE is a group of strategies that supports children's health, growth, and learning through three main strategies: gardening, food and nutrition, and agriculture education, and buying and serving local food. So it really is like the sister or brother sibling program to Farm to School. It just really focuses in on that birth to 5 age group, whereas Farm to School is primarily focused on your K through 12 schools. And while they at the heart of it have the same goals of introducing children to gardening and food and nutrition, agriculture, education, and local foods. The implementation of these two initiatives are different. Farm to school, in a school setting, you can have it a little bit more structured with your lessons and with things that are happening in the cafeteria. But when it comes to farm to ECE, it's a whole different ballpark, because there's different ways that farm to ECE is implemented depending on if you are in a childcare home. I think some states call it like friend, neighbor, FFN, friend, family, or neighbor. In Michigan, we call it in-home childcare. And then there's also childcare centers. And then, of course, there can be early care and education programs that are done through schools or other community organizations. So there's a lot of different ways that farm to early care and education really can show itself in different settings. And I think that is a challenge that we have with farm to ECE, in that there's so many different settings, as well as farm to school has gained so much traction that a lot of times people think that it's just an easy copy and paste. Let's do the same things that we're doing in school and do it with our preschool population. And it's different. There's different adjustments that need to be made. The children are at a different level of learning. So a lot of times it looks more like including story time, including local food with story time, or show and tell, or taste test, or sticker voting, and if you tried something and if you liked it or not. So just wanted to point out some of those differences. And then from our partners at MSU Center for Regional Food Systems, I just want to share some of the benefits of farm to early care and education. So similar to farm to school, when engaging with farm to early care and education, it can help improve children's eating behaviors, including the willingness to try new foods, help children develop an awareness and knowledge of healthy eating, as well as where food comes from, seasonality, gardening, nutrition, and agriculture. It can be used as a way to connect children with more cultural food practices. There's some really fantastic work that is done in Hawaii with, I think they call it Farm to KY, is their farm to early care and education. And they have cultural foods that are really brought in and used as a tool to help them implement farm to early care and education, while also being very culturally inclusive. And something that we like to say here in Michigan, when it comes to farm to school and farm to early care and education, is that these initiatives can really help children to see themselves within their community, which is something that is aligned with the whole child model of learning. And of course, farm to early care and education helps to support local farmers and food businesses and help to bolster that local food economy and developing regional food systems. So those are just a few of the benefits. I wanted to point out some of the different organizations here in Michigan that are doing farm to early care and education work. This is not exclusive, or this is not all inclusive, of all of the organizations that are involved, but this is just a handful of some of the organizations who are really doing this farm to early care and education work. So the National Kidney Foundation of Michigan, as well as the Michigan State University Extension, handle Go Knapsack here in Michigan, which is a multi-course tool that's used for healthier childcare environments. Eastern Michigan University has a Cabbage grant, which is a capacity building grant for farm to early care and education. Michigan State Center for Regional Food Systems and their Farm to Early Care and Education Network has the FIG, Farm to Early Care and Education Implementation Grant. Keep Growing Detroit does a lot of garden-based learning opportunities. That's the language that they use, is garden-based learning. And then us at Groundwork, assisting with 10 cents a meal, and myself as the Farm to Early Care and Education Specialist, and trying to tie those things together. So just very briefly, some of the people and organizations involved in this work. And what does farm to early care and education look like here in Michigan? So we have Go Knapsack. Again, there's different farm to early care and education trainings that happen with different partnerships. Keep Growing Detroit I actually was just sitting in on a training yesterday that was focused on garden-based learning, where I was able to share some information about 10 cents a meal. But a lot of these things are all like interconnected, right? I'm trying to pair them out just for clarity's sake, but in truth, they all kind of cross over. And when there's grant-funded opportunities, for interventions with childcare providers, there's often a training component, and all of the people who are involved kind of collaborate to help deliver those trainings. There's local food purchasing that is assisted by things like mini grants. There is a Growing Healthy Eaters grant that's really focusing on community supported agriculture, or CSA, that is linking childcare home providers with community supported agriculture boxes, and as well as training, and Go Knapsack is a component in that as well. There is coalition building through the Michigan Farm to Early Care and Education Network. And then one thing that's happening that we're kind of wrapping now is a statewide strategic planning for farm to early care and education. As part of the Farm to Early Care and Education Implementation Grant, or FIG, that the Center for Regional Food Systems has, and that is gathering different collaborators. We've been working on this strategic planning, trying to develop what farm to early care and education in Michigan should look like over the next 5 years or so. And I do want to say that, Mackenzie, you had said earlier that in Kentucky, farm to ECE isn't as far along as farm to school. And I think that that's something that we see nationally. Certainly here in Michigan, we've really only been working with farm to ECE for about the past 5 years or so. So it really is quite a newer initiative that's happening. And I do think it's gaining some traction. But it is still being built. So it's definitely one of those, we're building the plane while we're flying it as well. All right, next slide. So I wanted to share this slide. It is from a farm to early care and education convening that happened in New Orleans last fall with the Policy Equity Group, with funding the W.K. Kellogg Foundation. And the W.K. Kellogg Foundation has really invested in a lot nationally in farm to early care and education development. And so this gathering that Policy Equity Group brought together was the group of national and state partners who WKKF has funded for these farm to early care and education initiatives. So I was fortunate enough to attend on behalf of Michigan. We are a priority state for the Kellogg Foundation that is based here in Michigan. And one of the activities that we did was this board that you see on the screen of how farm to early care and education has developed here in Michigan. I thought it was a perfect thing to be able to kind of snapshot and give you somewhat of a timeline of how things have developed. And I also chatted with my colleague, Megan Shedd from the Center for Regional Food Systems, who's led a lot of this farm to early care and education work to try to clarify and get some dates and that kind of thing. And so we're going to start on the left side, and where you see that yellow kind of feather with a chicken and an egg in it is when the idea for farm to ECE hatched. That was kind of the basics. And from there, we kind of buttoned it up. And in August of 2018 is really when the Michigan State University Center for Regional Food Systems received funding from the WK Kellogg Foundation to address the specific goal of supporting a procurement pilot for farm to early care and education in at least 2 of the 3 Kellogg Foundation target cities. And those target cities are, the 3 are Grand Rapids, which is on the west side where I'm located, Detroit, and then Battle Creek. where Battle Creek is, where the Kellogg Foundation is headed, and the Kellogg cereal company. And this included identified goals of using Go Knapsack, which is that tool that we were talking about before. And I'm actually just curious, have you all heard of Go Knapsack? Okay, I will try to give a brief introduction to what it is. And I'm gonna, oh my gosh, I don't remember the acronym. Okay. I'm not going to be able to bring it out of my brain right now. But basically, Go Knapsack is a validated tool. I believe the North Carolina founded this tool, and it's made up of different modules that are all based around improving childcare environments and making them healthier. So there are modules in there for farm to early care and education, for dental health, and for physical activity for the children. I think there's maybe one on like reducing screen time. But basically, there are these modules that give training, and then there's a goal setting part as well, where you set different goals for yourself as a child care provider to try to meet them to improve your child care environment. So this Go Knapsack tool has that farm to early care and education module, and that is what that, in addition to the goal setting for farm to early care and education, is what that section was about. Additionally, there was a logic model that was drafted in 2019 to 2020, and then refined in August of 2020. And then we have the Farm to Early Care and Education Network that we know now, and that was really started in July 2019. So these are, some points that have happened in the development of farm to early care and education in Michigan, and really that was not that long ago. So we're still building this and trying to figure out where we're going. In the middle section, you'll see there is a note to COVID that really derailed a lot of things as we knew it. And then, of course, during that same time, we had a state investment of 10 cents a meal that was already in existence, but in 2020 was really the time where the program expanded to then include early care and education centers. And so we are really only in about our third year or so of having early care and education centers be eligible to participate in 10 cents a meal. And we're still trying to work some things out as well. And so I'll be talking a little bit more about that as we get into this 10 cents a meal stuff just shortly. And then we have the cabbage and fig grants. And then on the right side, we have our eyes to the future guy of what can we do next. And so that's where we had that statewide farm to EC strategic planning, and we have some additional ideas as well as additional questions. So that's kind of the point that we find ourselves in right now. Okay, I'm sure everybody is curious about how we funded this work, so I wanted to give a little brief overview on that. So a lot of the work has been grant funded. The Kellogg Foundation, as I had mentioned, has invested a lot in farm to early care and education nationwide. But then, of course, close to home here in Michigan. And I do want to share that some of my work with 10 cents a meal is also funded by the Kellogg Foundation. So they really have invested a lot in food systems work and farm to early care and education. And it's really helped us continue that forward. The Michigan Health Endowment Fund has also been involved through some of our partners, I believe with the National Kidney Foundation. The Allen Foundation is funding that Growing Healthy Eaters grant that is trying to connect in-home childcare providers with community-supported agriculture boxes. And then we have the Association of State Public Health Nutritionists, or ASPHN, that was able to secure funding from nationally from CDC and and HHS. And so that is what's funding those Farm to Early Care and Education Implementation Grant, or FIG. as well as the capacity building grant, or cabbage, that some of the partners that you saw on that screen just a few slides ago with all of the different logos that they are working on. And then we have the state funded 10 cents a meal program. So that's a nice segue into that next section. So I wanted to do a brief overview of 10 cents a meal, because it is one of the programs that we have here in Michigan that we're working on developing further so that it can really have a big impact on farm to ECE, because this provides financial incentive for that local food procurement portion. So 10 cents a meal is a competitive matching grant that provides incentive funding for schools, early care and education sites, community organizations who are feeding children, for using Michigan-grown fruits, vegetables, and dry beans in their USDA child nutrition meals that they're serving. Thanks to some legislation changes, we've been able to help streamline this process of how reimbursements work and how reporting works. And so starting with this year, 10 cents is really used as a calculation mechanism. So the Department of Education takes 10 cents and they multiply it by how the meal and snack count from the previous year for a prospective grantee. And that comes up with a number that represents the maximum grant that they can get. And then from there, that max grant, a grantee must spend double, because it is a matching grant, and then they will receive 50% back. So let's say a grantee has a grant of $5,000. To get that full $5,000, they'll actually need to spend $10,000. Another way of saying that is, if you spend $10,000 on local Michigan grown food that's eligible, then you'll get $5,000 back. And for participating in this program, here are just some of the high level things that a grantee would need to do. So purchase local food, provide food, nutrition, and learning opportunities to the children that they're working with, and then submitting invoice information to the Department of Education. And I realized I also forgot there is a survey component, but those surveys are about 2 to 4 surveys across the whole program year. So the goals of 10 cents a meal are to improve daily nutrition and eating habits for Michigan's children in school and child care settings, while also investing in Michigan's agriculture and related food business economy. So the program itself is implemented by the Michigan Department of Education, and as a matching grant, doubling the investment doubling the state investment in Michigan grown fruits, vegetables, and dry beans by reimbursing 50% of those eligible foods up to the maximum grant. Just a quick slide on eligibility. So any sponsor who's feeding children through a USDA child nutrition program is eligible to apply for 10 cents a meal. So those are places like schools, early child care education centers, after school programs, community orgs, residential youth programs. There's even like juvenile detention centers that are participating in 10 cents a meal. And some of those USDA child nutrition programs, those would be like National School Lunch Program, School Breakfast Program, or even the Child and Adult Care Food Program, and summer meals. As far as what kinds of foods that these grantees can purchase, they are any Michigan-grown fruit, vegetable, or dry bean that is minimally processed. So that means it could be fresh, frozen, washed, packed, dried, but it can't be cooked or canned or pre-made. So one example that we like to use is Michigan applesauce that you buy that would maybe come in a can is not eligible. But if you want to buy Michigan apples and then make applesauce with the kids and then serve it to them as part of their snack, that would be just fine. And as expectations for grantees, there's that invoice information that I mentioned before. And with that, a grantee needs to be able to provide the product that they bought, as well as the farm name and farm county where that product was from, and the dollar amount so that the Department of Education knows how much they need to pay the grantee back. There are those regular surveys that are about between 2 to 4 times a year. I'll say this year, 2023 program year, happened a little bit slowly. And so it was very, very delayed. And so there's only going to be 2 surveys this year. And then also that marketing and education component, taste tests, posters, story time, family engagement, gardening. Those are all different ways that grantees can fulfill that marketing and education component. And then I just want to move on to something that's really exciting that I've been working on for the past 2-3 years or so, and that is working to expand 10 cents a meal to home providers as well as child care providers who are participating in the child and adult care food program through a CACFP sponsor. So when the Department of Education opened up 10 cents a meal to early care and education providers back in 2020, one thing that was not included ahead of time was a plan for how we were going to include providers who participate through a child and adult care food sponsor. So if you're not familiar with the child and adult care food program, you can, here in Michigan, you can either participate directly by working with the Department of Education who implements CACFP here in Michigan. And with that, you need to be able to handle all of the reporting requirements yourself and the oversight and all of the regulations that are federally imposed for the program. You need to be able to take care of that yourself. Or you can use a child and adult care food sponsor that really helps to train, to do the oversight, do the submission of your meals, and also assist with payments. And then those sponsors also take a portion of those funds as their fee, essentially. And so what I have really been working on, when I realized that there wasn't really a great way for that group, the group who is working with a sponsor, to participate in 10 cents a meal, is to really try to figure out how to make that happen. And I do want to add that I actually used to work for a CACFP sponsor, so I'm very familiar with the program and with how some of these things work. And so ACD, or the Association of Child Development, is actually the sponsor that I used to work with, and is also the sponsor who is piloting 10 cents a meal for this special group of providers who participate through a CACFP sponsor. And so this pilot is really the first step to making 10 cents a meal more accessible to home providers and centers who do use a CACFP sponsor, because we're trying to figure out how this works, right? How does the CACFP sponsor get compensated for doing this additional administrative work? How do they train their providers who are participating in the program? How do they get all of the information that they need so that they can get the reimbursements and then distribute funds? All of the things we're trying to figure out. And so it actually started in 2021 when I was able to present to the Association of Child Development at their in-service to talk about 10 cents a meal. And at that time I had heard, wow, it would be really great for our home providers to be able to participate in this, because a lot of times they already have gardens that they're sourcing their food from and feeding the children with. And this could help them out even more by providing extra funds for that. And then back in 2022, last year, when there was a second window for 10 cents a meal application, we were able to connect with ACD and MDE to help launch the first pilot with just childcare centers. We wanted to start with the centers that this sponsor worked with, just to see how it could work. And it worked well. And it was one thing that we heard was that once the sponsor got started, it wasn't as hard as they thought it was going to be. So working out some of those kinks. And then this year we were able to pilot 10 cents a meal with home providers. So it's really great to finally be able to do that. We have 50 providers signed up to do this pilot in about 10 centers. And we're also collaborating with that Growing Healthy Eaters grant to try to maximize the amount of funding that we can get providers who are eligible for both of these programs. So we're working on it, working on Farm to EC, but I'm happy to share some of the work that we have been able to do. And as you in Kentucky are working on developing what Farm to EC looks like in your state, I'm happy to share experiences so that you can learn from us and hopefully be inspired by us too. So thank you. And Mackenzie, I don't know how much time we have left, but I'm happy to answer questions if people have it and if time allows.
Yeah, thanks, Melanie. We do have one question in the chat, and if anybody else has questions for Melanie, feel free to drop them in the chat, or actually you can raise your hand too, and then unmute yourself. So the first question that we have is, do you know if grants are awarded to ECE enters that are private businesses, specifically Montessori schools? And then she talks about how a lot of Montessori schools aren't eligible for grants because they're not a nonprofit and they're also not a state facility.
So I believe you're asking about for 10 cents a meal. Is that right?
That's what I assumed she was asking about.
If you want to come off of mute and clarify that, that'll help me answer that question a little bit better. Sustainable Glasgow.
Yes, that's what I'm asking.
Okay, for 10 cents a meal. So yes, for-profit centers are able to participate in 10 cents a meal. And there are some that do. Specifically speaking to Montessori schools, I am not sure. I feel like I'm just trying to think too, because sometimes Montessori is included in their curriculum, but it's not necessarily in the name. But for the purposes of your question, and with it being that in your case, you're saying they're not eligible for grants because they're not a nonprofit or state facility, for-profit ECE centers who participate in 10 cents a meal, who participate in a child nutrition program are eligible to participate in 10 cents a meal. Where we kind of run into some challenges with that is that some for-profit centers aren't eligible to participate in the child and adult care food program due to, I think, the different like community eligibility provisions or the finances of that community. And so we have had some child care centers who are interested in participating in 10 cents a meal, but aren't necessarily eligible because they're not participating in a child nutrition program. Does that help answer that question?
Yes. I'm curious also if Kentucky has something similar to the 10 cent a meal program. Can someone answer
We do
that?
not. Yeah, we don't have anything similar to that program besides the local food for schools funding, which is a federally funded program and is not long term. But it's something that we've definitely thought about advocating for. We do have the Kentucky Proud Buy Local program. I'm not sure if daycare centers or Montessori schools would be eligible for that program. Do you know, Lori? Or is anybody from KDA here?
I think they should. Grace could answer that question. Here, she's off mute.
Good question, and I will get back to you. We've never had that before.
But since restaurants participate in it and they are private businesses, that seems like it's the same kind of thing.
It should be fine, being that they are schools. But that's something I would like to double check on first.
Yeah, and so the Kentucky Proud Buy Local program provides up to 15% reimbursement for Kentucky Proud products, depending on if they were grown and produced and what level of that in Kentucky. And then there are caps on that, like a yearly cap and a cap for a lifetime cap. So, okay, so one more quick question, Melanie. Sorry, I was reading one of the other questions. Monica asked, what are some more examples of sponsors for 10 cents a meal? And I clarified if she was asking like who else can participate. Do you want to go back to that slide where you talked about who can participate?
That's where I was going. So for eligibility for participating in 10 cents a meal, the primary thing that makes somebody eligible is if they participate in a USDA child nutrition program. So what all of these organizations have in common is that they would all participate in either the National School Lunch Program or School Breakfast Program or Child and Adult Care Food Program or Summer Feeding Program. Any of those USDA child nutrition programs would make somebody eligible. And so you'll see here, I said any sponsor, right? And that's kind of where some of that language comes in, where a sponsor is someone who has a direct fiscal relationship with the entity who is implementing that program. So here in Michigan, that would be the Michigan Department of Education, who handles all of those federal child nutrition programs and implementation. And that's also where we run into the whole sponsor of the child and adult care food program, but not necessarily the entity who is feeding the children, right? And so that's where we're kind of working out how that would work.
Okay. Well, if anybody else has any questions, Melanie put her email on the screen, and Melanie, if you wouldn't mind to put that in the chat, that would be
of course.
awesome. We could talk to you all day because what you all are doing is really interesting, and I think it's great to learn from each other. So I really appreciate you being here today.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity to share.
Tyler, do you have a quick question?
Yeah, just a quick one. When it comes to, who's eligible, who can participate in 10 cents a meal, that's more of a function of just what your legislature created, right? That's just how the law was crafted. That's not necessarily like some federal requirement.
Yeah, you're completely right. So 10 cents a meal is a state program. And so the legislation for it is on the state level, and it is something that was dictated by the state when the law was being crafted, that in order to participate, a grantee would need to participate in a USDA child nutrition program. And I've had some conversations with our partners over at MDE, and like one thing that kind of came up was, because it's a state program and it's state funded, there needs to be some level of oversight there, right? And if a grantee was not participating in a USDA child nutrition program, there would be no way of them checking in about, what kinds of meals were being served with that produce and that kind of thing. So I think that it was an intentional move to try to line it up, so that those who are eligible would need to participate in a USDA child nutrition program. But yes, you are correct that is a state legislation and was put in there because of the state and not federally. Yeah, hope that helps.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Melanie. You're welcome to stay on for the rest of our meeting, but we totally understand if you have other Michigan things to do. Everybody, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen again so that we can go through some network updates. And we're going to do these fairly quickly because we have a lot going on, but just wanted to give you guys a couple updates about things that have happened in the past 2 months since our last meeting in April. So we did have 2 in-person and 1 virtual school garden educator workshops in April and May. Those went really well. Our garden interns were the ones that designed the program. And then it was cool because for the in-person workshops, the schools had a hands-on component for the educators. So they got to see the garden and also like do some work in it. So in this picture, the one on the left, you can see some of our garden educators learning how to plant microgreens. And then on the right, that's some of our interns helping with a, why is the word escaping me? Sensory garden. At West Jessamine Middle School, they're putting in a sensory garden. So that was really awesome, and we had a great time with that. So I just wanted to share that. An upcoming update is that next week we will be at the Kentucky School Nutrition Association Conference, and we're on the agenda 3 different times, which is super exciting. So if you're a food service director or a food service staff member, be sure to see us on during our presentations. So one of them will be on how to talk to a farmer. We're going to bring farmers in and give you all a chance to ask them questions, and we have some questions for them too. We have a presentation on alternatives to lettuce, so talking about different types of greens. And then we also have a presentation on serving garden produce in the cafeteria. And then
Mackenzie, let me jump in there for just a second.
Yeah.
I'm doing the presentation on the alternatives to lettuce, and I'm looking for great examples of people using Kentucky grown greens in their cafeterias. So I'm putting my email address in the chat, and I hope if any of you have had successes or know of successes with using Kentucky grown greens in cafeterias, I'm crowdsourcing for lots of good examples for that.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks, Lori. So last but certainly not least, we will have a booth at the food show and are going to be featuring some locally grown produce. So stop by, that's on Tuesday. So if you're at the conference, stop by and sample some of our locally grown food and meet some farmers. And then kind of a really quick note, our Farm to School Month working group will start meeting again either this month or next month. So if you were not previously on that working group but want to be, please let me know. Or if you have just some really good ideas for what we could do for Farm to School Month in Kentucky, feel free to reach out and share those. So you can put in the chat if you want to be in that working group, or feel free to email me afterwards. So a really quick update about our taste test mini grants. So most of our grant activities wrapped up this past week at the end of May, and their reports aren't due until the end of this week, but we do have 15 reports that have been submitted so far out of about 40, keeping in mind some grants are getting an extension to the end of summer. But our first 15 reports are showing that over 6,000 Kentucky school students participated in these taste testing activities. And of the 15 grantees, 81% of their funds were spent with Kentucky farmers on Kentucky grown fruits and vegetables, and a couple schools purchased some plants. So that's really exciting. And you can see some pictures there of students doing their taste testings, and we look forward to sharing more pictures and more data at the end of summer when we get through all of the taste test mini grant projects. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Lori, who's going to talk a little bit about our Farm to School Challenge.
Sure. So we had 41 schools who enrolled in the challenge this year and 16 schools who completed the challenge and turned in their challenge form at the end of the year. And from those 16, we drew 3 random winners. So we're excited to be announcing today our winners for this year's challenge, who are Deep Springs Elementary in Fayette County, Kingdom Academy of the Bluegrass in Anderson County, and St. Mary's School in Bourbon County. So we worked with them to pick out their prizes this year. I know we have Miranda Chaplin on here from St. Mary's School. Do you want to say anything, Miranda?
Sure. I want to thank you all for that opportunity. I know that through our participation in the Kentucky Farm Network in the challenge over the last 2 years, we've been able to really increase a lot of our ag literacy efforts. And so we're really excited. We do not have a typical cafeteria program. our students pack their lunches. So for us to be able to incorporate more fresh fruits and vegetables from a local farmer is going to be a huge opportunity for our school. So just thank you so much for this opportunity. And we're really excited to put these dollars to work and using that support to support a local farmer in our community as well.
So we're going to be sending out completion certificates to the 16 schools that participated, with some small prizes for them also, and sending out press releases. So we hope that some schools are going to get some good press for the good work that they've done this year in Farm to School with the challenge. Mackenzie, you're muted.
I was going to say, Lori, do you want to do the LFS update first, or do we want to talk about these upcoming opportunities? Any preference?
Either way.
Okay,
It was going to be Casey, not me.
Okay, let's have Casey do her local Food for Schools updates, and then if we have time, I will talk about some upcoming opportunities.
Hi everyone, I am the grant specialist at KDA for the local Food for Schools program. So we had trainings back in March, and our food service directors have been using their money. We have 9 schools that have submitted for reimbursement. That equals to a little over $24,000, so that's exciting. I do have office hours scheduled that I will send out later this week to the food service directors, and that'll be June 20th, 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. Eastern time. That's a time for just anyone to hop on and be able to ask me questions or tips on how to go into the new school year to use their money. We did have to send out a second agreement to be signed by the superintendent, so our reimbursements haven't been reimbursed yet, but we are working on getting those agreements back to be able to give out those reimbursements. We are continuing to update our LFS master producer list, so we are adding farmers every day to that list. I'm encouraging schools to send us any kind of farmer that they know of or are working with to add to that list. And then we are also requesting schools to send us on how they're using this LFS money.
Casey, is that list available somewhere?
It is on the website on
Okay.
the school page. It's under master producer list.
Cool, thanks.
Yeah, and there's also a form on there that farmers can go to, and if they fill out that form, their information will be uploaded to that list.
That's great. Thank you, Casey, for sharing that. $24,000. That's really exciting. It's only been a couple months, so that's awesome. Thank you for your work on that. So I think we'll go ahead and do our Jamboard activity, and then I will share these upcoming opportunities. They'll be in our e-newsletter, and just because I want to make sure that we have time for everybody to share what's happening in their world. So Lori, do you want to talk really quick about how to do the Jamboards again?
Sure, I just put the link in the chat, so you can open that and then.
Lori, we need access to it.
Let me see. I think I just fixed it, Kristen. Okay. Yep, I see people joining in now. Great. So at the top, you'll see there's some pages, 1 out of 6 listed. You can scroll through the pages there. There's a page for school gardens, 1 for cafeterias, 1 for classrooms and education, and then 1 other good stuff page. And you can add sticky notes there and tell us all about the good things that you have going on in Farm to School in your neck of the woods. See lots of people joining in there. That's great. So if you haven't used Jamboards before, feel those of you who already know how to do this, just jump on in there. But if you haven't used Jamboards before, on the left you have a toolbar, and in the middle of the toolbar there's a little square with its corner turned up, and that's the sticky note. If you click on that, you can add your text in there to whatever page you're on. And then if you click save, it'll post your sticky note to the page for everybody to see. We got summer meals starting. We've got our interns doing lessons at the farmers market. New raised beds going in Fayette County. That's great. If anybody's not able to access the Jamboard, if you want to put anything in the chat or just unmute and we'll put it in there for you.
I wanted to ask if any of the food service directors that are doing summer meals, what you're sourcing local if you're doing that. I was just curious what you're serving for the summer meals.
You want a verbal answer or on the Jamboard?
Sure, yeah. Tell us what you got, Dalla.
We have blueberries getting ready to be harvested and brought for our summer meals. And a lot of those blueberries are also going to be frozen so that we can use it throughout the school year. Super pumped about that. Lettuce, of course, is a big deal. Need More Acres is going to be providing watermelons as usual. And then peach season is going to be coming about, and we're going to use that from our local peach person, Jackson's Orchard. We're pretty excited. Summer is a big usage for us for local produce.
That's awesome. Thanks for sharing, Dalla.
See, we've also got Jennifer Wheeler on here. Jennifer, do you have anything you want to share about what's going on in Marion County? Oh, looks like Jennifer might not be able to talk right now.
Okay, Lori, do you think we're good with that activity?
Sure, yeah, you all can keep on adding to it.
Or does anybody have anything they want to share, like super exciting, you want to share out loud? Okay, that is totally fine. I will then feature some of our national upcoming opportunities that I found. These will all be in the e-newsletter as well. But I just wanted to share them verbally because there's some grant opportunities and advocacy opportunities. And so for some upcoming grant opportunities, there is a National Garden Bureau Therapeutic Garden Grant that is due on July 1st. And if I can figure out how to get to the chat while having my screen shared, I'm going to put all these in the chat, all these links. And then there's also 2 different Green Our Planet Garden grant programs. One of them is more of like a mentorship program for school garden leaders, and the other one is for a hydroponic garden system grant. And that one does require a $2,000 match out of the $10,000 that the project budget has to be. There is some advocacy work that can be done right now. So the Farm Bill is in process, and I'm going to let Lori just briefly describe what the Farm Bill is and how it works. But the Farm to School Network is encouraging people to advocate for farm to school in the 2023 Farm Bill. And there's a link there for how to do that. So Lori, do you want to talk briefly about that?
Yeah, I'm also going to put in there the National Farm to School Network. Gosh, it's a really long URL. That's a link to their Farm Bill platform. But some of the things they're advocating for are generally support for local food systems, trying to make opportunities more available to support increased diversity and fairness in local food systems, and then specifically some of the marketing grant activities to make them explicitly apply to farm to school marketing opportunities. So that seems like a really easy ask, because it's not asking for more money, it's just asking for a different way to apply the funding that's already existing. Yeah, and so the Farm Bill is being drafted now. It's been delayed multiple times this year, and the current Farm Bill expires in September, but they'll have to extend the current Farm Bill, because it's not likely that the new one's going to be ready to go by September of this year. It's written by both the House of Representatives and the Senate, and then they have to get their 2 versions together to agree. So all your House of Representatives and your congressional and your senators, especially those that are on the House and Senate Ag committees, which we only have one from Kentucky, and that's Senator McConnell on the Ag committee, Senate side. But any of your federal representatives can co-sponsor bills that will become part of the Farm Bill, and they will all vote on the final version. Yeah, there's some things in place right now about the congregate meals and the expiration of additional reimbursements at the end of June that are not Farm Bill issues, they're separate issues, but our State Representative Morgan McGarvey out of Louisville has co-sponsored one of those pieces of legislation that's asking to extend those benefits. So those are some of the things that are going on in federal policy right now.
Yeah. Thanks, Lori, for that update. And then a couple other exciting upcoming opportunities. There's a webinar in like 2 weeks from kidsgardening.org, and it's featuring Asian and Asian American culture in youth gardens. There's 2 conferences coming up that I thought you all might be interested in, including the National Ag in the Classroom Conference in Orlando at the end of June, and a conference I had never heard of before, which is the National Children and Youth Garden Symposium, and that's going to be in Knoxville, Tennessee in mid-July. And then I just saw today that the Adopt a Cow program is now open for registration for classes for next year. I've heard really great feedback from teachers that have participated in the program. Their kids basically get to like adopt this cow and watch it grow up throughout the year, which is super fun for the kids. And speaking of early childhood education, that's something that my mom, who's a preschool teacher, has done in her classroom as kind of like a farm to school initiative. So be sure to register for that if you're a teacher. And lastly, our next meeting will be Tuesday, August 8th at 3 p.m. And we hope to see some of you at the KSNA conference next week. So thanks everybody for being here. It was great to see you. Again, feel free to email me if you want to be a part of the Farm to School Month working group. Bye, everybody.
When is that KSNA?
That is next week. It's the main conference is Monday through Wednesday.
And where is that?
In Lexington. I can
Thank
send
you.
it to you, Brandy.
Yeah, if you
I'll
don't mind
email
sending it
you
to me.
a link.
Thank you.
Bye, Mackenzie.
Bye, everybody. Good to see you.